Right, so this is our passage this morning. We are exploring the story of the Good Shepherd. So this is a chance, if you are a kind of fidgety person or if you are a little person who needs something to do, this is your chance to start making your sheep. You have as long as my talk, and you'll get a kind of a 1.5 minute warning until you need your sheep, all right? And then we are going to try and gather our flock. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we're going to give it a go, all right? So this is your chance to go. Now, while the rest of us have a listen. So Jesus gives this long speech to the Pharisees, which is one group of the religious leaders at the time. And the more he talks, the more confused they look. But they were feeling pretty sheepish by the end. These were common symbols in the Old Testament, after all. The scriptures talks loads about sheep. There's a bit in Numbers, Jeremiah talks about sheep twice, and in Ezekiel 34, there's this long passage about the Good Shepherd and his sheep. But something about the way that Jesus explains this means that the Pharisees don't seem to recognize it, which is probably, to be honest, for the best, as what he's saying is so mind-bendingly, world-bendingly radical that in the end, they kill him for this. But speaking of not recognizing something, as some of you might know, I grew up in the Lake District. And a fun fact about the Lake District is that they actually have more sheep than people living there. I also happen to have been reading a book by a Cumbrian shepherd to kind of while away my lockdown. So I've learned a lot about sheep and shepherds in the past few weeks. Like, did you know the practices in Highland sheep kind of areas like the Lake District haven't changed for about 5,000 years? So you could place a Viking on the fells and he would probably kind of know what was going on for a shepherd's year, which is pretty cool. Which means that he's about 3,000 years longer than Jesus was around. So these sheep practices haven't changed in ages. But you know what I never recognize is pictures of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. So I'm going to share my screen and see if this is a sheep picture that you guys have kind of recognized or something similar. So this is a picture that seems to come up a lot or similar. You always have Jesus as a shepherd looking really clean, which for a start is new to me. And his sheep are always really clean too. Again, not how the sheep I know. And he always looks really serene, really kind of peaceful. Again, not familiar. And it's always sunny. I don't know why, it's always sunny. Again, not how I remember shepherding looking like. And this is more what I know shepherds to look like. This is our neighbour. This is Philip Stanley. I managed to find this online, which might be a little bit creepy. But he's the guy that my parents bought the land for our house off of, and he's a sheep farmer just down the road. Now, don't get me wrong, Philip is also not really that much like Jesus in many ways, but because he's not perfect. But I'm starting to see a lot more similarities between sheep farmers like Philip and Jesus, the ultimate Good Shepherd. And there's a brilliant quote from the book that I've been reading that I'm gonna read to you. I ended up getting it on Kindle because lockdown means that I can't buy books. But this is the little quote from him. So James Rebanks, this is A Shepherd's Life. He says, "There is little joy in working in the sodden, wet days of winter. It proves too much for some people. When the National Trust rents out farms to people new to this world, folk that are often giddy with enthusiasm for the farming life, it tends to end badly. The get up and get out voice in their heads isn't strong enough, and they just don't care enough about the sheep and the land to sustain their initial enthusiasm once the going inevitably gets tough. Things fall apart and they soon leave. The voice in our heads is what holds the Lake District together, puts the walls back up, drains the fields and keeps the sheep well tended and bred. Many of these things defy rational economics. Some of our friends spend 50 or more days a year rebuilding the walls on their farms, when letting them fall down and selling the stone might be the modern solution. It is done because it should be done." Now, James Rebanks goes on to tell us about his breakfast and his day, but I won't keep reading. There's a few things that I think we can see a similarity between James Rebanks' A Shepherd's Life and Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and his passage. Both James and Jesus see a good shepherd as someone who's in it for the long haul. A good shepherd is mucky. Unlike those serene pictures of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, his hair is all over the shop from the wind. His coat is torn from pulling a sheep out the beck. His boots are mucky from traipsing across the fell. If Jesus is the Good Shepherd, and I do believe that he is, he will weather even a Cumbrian winter for his flock. And right now you might be feeling a little bit weather beaten. I hope it's a comfort to know that the Good Shepherd will weather this with you. The other thing that I notice about sheep and their shepherds is that both James and Jesus talk about a topsy-turvy economic logic, one that makes little sense. So for James, spending months slowly rebuilding dry stone walls doesn't make economic sense to modern farming methods. Similarly, the cross and resurrection didn't make sense to Jesus's onlookers. But just as dry stone walling shapes the landscape of the fells, the cross shapes the lives of Jesus's followers down the centuries, and hopefully us too. And as we journey from Easter to Pentecost, I pray the Holy Spirit draws us each into a deeper understanding of Jesus's topsy-turvy economy. And my final point, point 3, shepherds love their sheep. But this is not a shallow, woolly love. Shepherds aren't sentimental people. They love their sheep because they know them. They've bred them carefully, picking the perfect ewe and the perfect tup. And they can trace back a sheep's heritage for generations. And they'll be putting plans in place for as soon as a sheep is born. How much more does God know us and love us? The Bible has so many beautiful passages about how Jesus knows us and loves us. In Psalm 139, it talks of us being knitted together in our mother's womb. Again, a little sheepy metaphor. But I don't know about you if you've ever tried knitting. I've tried it and I've literally never finished a single project I've ever made because it takes time and it takes effort and I'm not very good at it. But Jesus knits us together in our mother's womb. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor of how much time and effort he takes into making us. And that it talks about his knowing us so well that he can count the hairs on our head. I hope that it's a real comfort to know that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, knows you and loves you in this way. The other thing that he talks about is the sheep learning to love the shepherd, that the sheep recognize his voice. That comes up in that passage, doesn't it? And it really is a thing that sheep will follow the voice of their shepherd. They learn it though. It's not naturally an innate thing. It's something that takes time. And they learn it from the rest of the flock. They learn to trust the shepherd, and see them as a source of safety and ultimately of food. Now, I do believe we were created to love God. I do think that there's an innate thing that means that we seek to seek him. There's an idea that we are restless until we find rest in God. But it also, I don't think, comes easily or naturally sometimes. I do believe that we have to learn to listen for the Good Shepherd's voice and to tune ourselves from it. And that's something that we learn from Jesus, but that we also learn from each other. And I hope that's an encouragement for us to teach each other that as well as listen for it. And finally, a good shepherd loves his sheep because they're his pride and his joy. At a shepherd's meet, a good shepherd isn't ultimately judged on his staff or the making of his staff, although there are competitions for that. He is not judged for how quickly he can run up a fell, even if there are competitions for that too. Ultimately, the good shepherd is judged by the health and the well-being of his flock. That's what a good shepherd is ultimately judged on. And I really hope others see how good our good shepherd is by the health and the well-being of his flock. That's us. I'm going to share a video which I find utterly mesmerizing. This video is the 1.5 minute warning for those who are making sheep, a chance to round up and get ready to gather our sheep. For the rest of us, if we want to watch this video and maybe take a few minutes just to rest and to listen to God, the Good Shepherd, tune ourselves to his voice, and consider what it means for us to be his good sheep.